Hello, and welcome to the first installment of what I'm calling the Angry Author. My name is Jeb Bohn. For those that don't have the distinct pleasure of knowing me, I am a writer. Primarily work in the realms of suspense and thrillers and a little bit of horror. What I would like to do with this series is explore some different options and topics around the world of writing. I was inspired to pick this first topic just due to a thread. I think I was on Reddit and I stumbled across something where somebody basically suggested that a story can be strong and a book can be incredibly good without good characters. And while I will agree that having a strong story is absolutely an integral part, to putting a book together, any kind of written work, anything that you want to convey emotion, you definitely want to have a strong story. However, I do take a little offense to how this person completely downplayed the importance of character, and I'll explain. We'll get into all of that good stuff. I kind of subscribe more to, I guess, what you could call the Seinfeld outlook on things. For those who aren't old enough to remember, or for those that have forgotten, the TV show Seinfeld had been described as a show about nothing. Oh, it's nothing. It's nothing. Why are people watching it? Well, there were odd situations that would pop up, but the primary driving force was the characters. You had the main characters who weren't necessarily the most likable people at all times, but there was something compelling enough about them that they could hold your interest. And then there were periphery characters that would pop up that would add different spice to the show. So you could take a show that had no real driving narrative other than the daily lives and misadventures of these characters. So while I will agree that for the most part story is important, I personally would rather, if put in the position of having to choose, I would rather read a book that had loose narrative, to no narrative, if it had compelling characters doing something, anything. They could be dropping off their dry cleaning, they could be shopping for groceries, but if it's an interesting character that has interesting thoughts that are conveyed, I can deal with that more than a story that might have a solid foundation but has no real driven characters, no type of character development, things of that nature. So, I mean, to me, character is something that cannot be downplayed when it comes to things like this. One of the main reasons being, if you have, and for the sake of this conversation, we'll assume that there is some type of a narrative holding everything together, not just a handful of characters being thrown into the abyss. But one of the things to me that makes a story that much more compelling, especially in a book where you're not looking at such necessarily a wide scale, is how the characters that are in the book are directly affected. How are their lives going along? Is there an event or something that happens that changes them? Maybe they were happy-go-lucky and they became incredibly cynical. Maybe they were a good guy and they turned evil. Or maybe they were bad and they saw the error of their ways and they became good. Who knows? Any number of things that progress a character, things that introduce some kind of a change, people that have an impact on their life. And the reason I say narrower in scope is when you look at something, and I hate to pick on one person, but if you look at, say, like the disaster films that were made by Roland Emmerich, you have The Day After Tomorrow, you have 2012. Those are two two that stand out to me, especially in 2012. There's such, and again, for those that aren't aware, there was all this commotion. Oh, 2012, the Mayan calendar ends. It's going to be the end of the world. All this stuff's going to happen. People thought there were going to be massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, electromagnetic storms, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, all that type of stuff. Of course, none of that's come to pass. Didn't happen. Okay. Roland Emmerich directed a movie called 2012 that focused on that. And there was a scene that took place, I believe it was in Los Angeles. Huge earthquake, huge tectonic event going on. The city's basically ripping itself apart. They're flying through, in a smaller aircraft, seeing all the destruction. You have the ground heaving up, subway tunnels exposed, trains go flying out into nothing. But it's so much on the screen at once that, for me at the very least, my mind is just automatically, okay, this is a movie. Okay, whatever. Suspend your disbelief. Just go along with it. There was so much going on. The scope was so large. You couldn't get past the fact that you're watching a movie, right? It's not that you don't care about the characters, but you know that the situation is just so absurdly huge. There's no real way to process what's going on as a believable situation for a person to be in. Now, I'll contrast that with a movie some of you might not know, may have never heard of. There was a movie that came out, I believe, in 1988 called Miracle Mile, and it had Anthony Edwards in it. Basically, without getting too far into the plot of that movie, he meets a girl. He sets a date to pick her up from work. When her shift gets off, she works at a cafe. He oversleeps. Goes to the cafe, is told that she's not there. Goes to try and call her. During his old interaction at the phone booth, and for those that don't know, those that are young, phone booths used to exist. You could find them on many street corners. You go, you pluck in some pocket change, you make a phone call. The phone rings, he answers it. It's a guy freaking out, saying that he's calling from this military base that happens to house nuclear missile silos. The implication is given that there's an attack underway. They're about to get their missiles out of the ground because it's a use it or lose it situation. And that leads him on a chain of events. He goes into the cafe. He tries to, make sense of what's going on. Is this real? Is it a practical joke? Through movie magic, one of the people there happens to be tied in with some shady government stuff. She's able to contact somebody and find out that, yeah, indeed, the nuclear war is upon us. We've got a helicopter leaving from this rooftop at this time. Be there or be turned into a pile of ashes. You're not, if you don't have SPF 9000, you're going to have a bad rest of the day. There's just no way around it. So in theory, global nuclear war is a very big subject to cover, but the way that this movie handles it, it focuses primarily on a smaller group of characters. The whole movie is not built up around scenes of destruction, cities being leveled, tens of thousands of people being vaporized. That's not the focus. It's more character driven. This is a situation we're in. How do we deal with it? And to me, that has much more of an impact than, okay, well, the entire world is coming to an end, which, in all fairness, if there's global nuclear war, we're all going to, cancel Christmas. It's done. We're not going to have a good time. But the scope in which it was handled was in such a way that you're able to focus on a much narrower window, and the characters become what drive the story, as opposed to being one action set piece to another action set piece. So, again, it just goes back to the point for me that character is what really, really is going to engage somebody. You might hook somebody into a book with a really good story. They might even read the entire thing and enjoy it for the most part without it having the strongest character development that you could imagine. You take that same story and you put in, even if it's just, you can have a book like I Am Legend, where you've basically, you're focusing primarily on one person throughout that book, but it's driven in such a way that everything is immediate. Everything is right there on you. You can feel what they're going through step by step as you go through the book. Now, if you took that back and you scaled it out and made it focus on a wider area and maybe not delve into the character as much, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be interesting to read, but it wouldn't be what it is. It would not have become what it has over the years, having been adapted to movies time over time. And I mean, to me, my favorite adaptation is still Vincent Price's The Last Man on Earth, just because it tends to have that more claustrophobic feel. It focuses primarily on that lone character, and then you had later adaptations like Charlton Heston's The Omega Man, where still an enjoyable movie. It's got plenty of 70s cheese on it, if you don't mind that kind of thing, but it spreads the story out more. You have more characters brought in, and to me, it's not a bad movie. It just doesn't have the same power behind it that The Last Man on Earth did. And then you get to the Will Smith movie, I Am Legend. Will Smith is a fantastic actor. You got a fantastic story, but the movie, you can blame the CG villains. That's definitely one thing that you could point to. But it's just, the scale is amped up again, so you lose some of that. So, and I know I'm a writer. I write books. I'm talking about movies. I'm a visual person, so it's just giving something to compare it to when you're thinking about it. If it helps you to think about things the way that I do, I hope to God that you don't really think about many things the way that I do. But if you do, it's just one of the things, come up with the basis of a story, develop a few, at least start off with one really strong character. Even if you can base them off of yourself. If you've got anxiety, maybe they've got anxiety. If you're a jackass, make them a jackass. Things like that. Make them somewhat relatable. It doesn't have to be the everyman character that everybody on Earth is going to be able to relate to, because honestly, in this day and age, you're probably not ever going to come up with a character that everybody's going to relate to. But you give them realistic motivations. You paint a picture of who they are, where they are, what happens as the story unfolds. Because at that point, it's not just the story, and the story becomes more than that. The story is not just, well, this is happening in the background. The story also becomes, how is this affecting this character, this person that I've come to identify with? How is this having an effect on them? And then you follow the sacred rule of writing a book, whether it be a novel, a novella, a short story, a movie, anything like that, is you show, don't tell. You paint the picture through your words about what changes they go through, where were they at when they started? This is how it affected them. Maybe they became stronger, maybe they became weaker, but then maybe through that weakness, it led them to some type of redemption, some type of endpoint. Maybe it doesn't end happily for them. Maybe they sacrifice themselves. Maybe they die in vain. Maybe it was for nothing. Maybe they don't overcome whatever demon that they were battling with. But you take the reader with you on that journey. And that's one of the big things to focus on. So, I go back to the opening point is, you can absolutely write a book that is completely story-driven. Characters are treated secondarily. Depending on your writing style, it could be one of the best things ever written. Far be it from me to ever dictate to anybody how they should write. Just from my point of view, when you have the characters to drive the story, it just adds that much more of a layer to it. I know to some people, that's probably going to sound obvious, but again, just from reading that comment and a thread of replies based on, there's other, there are people that don't necessarily value character. Maybe it's because of their definition of a character, their ideas of what a character should be. Maybe they just read something that they could not relate to the main character, so it kind of took them out a little bit, but they still liked the story. It could be a number of things. I would never tell somebody how to enjoy a book any more than I would tell somebody how to write one. Personally, you've got to have good characters. And again, like I said, that's my opinion. You have good, strong characters, and it can really elevate. It can even take a story that could be mediocre otherwise and elevate it, because, like I said, you're not just following the story from point A to point B. You're following the journey and the development of that character, whatever it may be. They might go completely backwards. It can be whatever you want it to be, but if you make them compelling enough, make them believable enough, not necessarily, like I said, in the sense of they don't have to be an everyman that everybody's going to pick up and relate to and be like, that's me, I see me in that character. That's not going to happen for everybody, and that's fine. Because if you start writing something to please everybody, it's going to be a mess, and you're probably going to just piss everybody off. But you can still create somebody that is compelling and realistic in the sense that they're not constantly doing something that's completely off the wall. They're not developing powers out of the blue that aren't explained. They're dealing with whatever they've got to deal with. Now, if they're a superhero and they've got those powers, or if it's something that comes up that's explained, they can do whatever they want to. They can fly through the center of the sun. Please don't kill the rest of us. We've got stuff to get on with. But, don't neglect that as part of the process whenever you sit down to write something, because it's just one of those things where you want to give the best possible experience for anybody that reads your book, whether you're writing only for yourself, whether you're writing just for a loved one, or whether you plan on publishing it through Amazon, any other outlet. You want to put paperbacks out, whatever you want to do. You want to not only reach the most people possible, but you want them to have some type of reaction to it. Maybe you want to make people angry. If that's what you go out for and you get it, then you've achieved your goal. Ideally, again, from my perspective, you want to entertain people. You want to keep them reading. You want to keep them turning the pages and not wanting to put it down. And I think that having strong, well-developed characters goes a long way into achieving that end result. But this has gone quite a bit longer than I had originally intended it to be. I do have a tendency to ramble, as I'm sure that you all picked up on. Before I sign off, I would like to invite everyone listening to swing by my website. It's going to be linked in the description. For those that are listening to audio only, it's www.jebbohn.net. It's JEBBOHN.net. You come up to my landing page, sign up for my newsletter. I will not spam you. Normally I send out maybe an email every month, give or take, just to update you on what I'm working on, promotions, things like that. But sign up for my mailing list. I do have a horror anthology novella that I released last December. Right now you can get that as an ebook for free when you sign up for my mailing list. I always try to do nice little things for my constant readers, for those that sign up for the mailing list, those that follow along with me. So be sure to check out that link, sign up for my mailing list, and I hope you guys have a great day. And until next time, I have been the Angry Author.